Hello, creative, and welcome back to the Empowered Creatives podcast, finding confidence between hustle and burnout. I'm your host, Victoria Hines, creative career coach, helping creatives just like you level up or find their next path in your career. So I'm really excited about this solo episode today. It is actually going to be one of a 3-part series because it's super important and it's something that we all face. It is that little word called resistance. So every human being in the entire world faces resistance. We all have limits that our bodies and minds are attuned to. We're used to accepting only so much love, success, and wealth. And when you aim higher, try to change or push past your current limitation, you kind of start to hear that little voice in your head that will attempt to hold you back. It might tell you you're not good enough, you're not worthy, or even that there is no point to your endeavors. Sound familiar? So our bodies and our minds are very good at keeping us safe. Except sometimes keeping us safe equates keeping us in our comfort zone, and that's no longer where we want to be. These subconscious actions, although well-meaning, are holding you back. So this episode, we're going to talk about what in the world is resistance, how does it show up, and why identifying it can help you continue to move forward towards your creative dreams.
Real quick, I'm going to interrupt this podcast to tell you about a really nifty tool that I've made just for you. As creatives, it's so easy to find ourselves lost in jobs that we don't really like. So much so that when we decide to find a day job or support job that we actually enjoy, we have no idea where to start. This is where a creative career audit comes in. Head to the show notes below to grab the link to my download, and you can get your free workbook that will help you identify what brings you joy and what drains you in the world of work. No more day jobs or support jobs that make you just feel inside. It's time to find something that's going to light you up again.
All right, so let's kick it off from the top. What in the world is resistance? Well, when you boil it all down, it is a hindrance to moving forward. It can show up as physical actions that stop you from achieving your goals. So habits you start to form. It can also be thoughts that attempt to keep you exactly where you are at. So that little voice in your head that's like, you can't do this. You shouldn't do this. You're not good enough. Other people have done it before you. Other people are better than you. Yep, that's all resistance. So you might have heard this term used with other names. So Seth Godin in the Icarus Deception likes to use the term lizard brain, which I think is really fun. Jen Sincero, if you've read You Are a Badass, calls it BS or the big snooze. It's also been called limiting beliefs. Gay Hendricks and the Big Leap calls it your upper limit. It also can be called your survival response. Anytime I talk to my therapist about, the fight or flight system inside of us, it's very similar, and it has a lot of connections to that. Me, on the other hand, I like to call it roadblocks. Because it's similar to writer's blocks, and we've all had those creative blocks that pop up on our way. But also, I think every single one of us as a creative, we're all on this hero's journey. And it's the second that we step into the journey, we start taking action, that those roadblocks are going to pop up along the way. So what form do these roadblocks take? So what are these different forms of resistance? So procrastination, big one, very common. Self-doubt or imposter syndrome. It can show up as criticism or seeking out trouble, picking fights or instigating drama, choosing to make yourself the victim or claiming victimhood, can show up as bullying, starting arguments, incessant worrying that won't stop, self-medication, so turning to booze, alcohol, drugs, that sort of thing. Chronically getting sick, especially if it's not related to an actual underlying medical issue, and fear. So this is by no means an extensive list, Resistance is actually incredibly innovative and flexible. In fact, it drives me up the wall at how creative and cunning it can get sometimes. It will literally do everything it can to keep you exactly where you are. Kind of reminds me of like the Wile E. Coyote, except unlike the Wile E. Coyote who never succeeds in capturing the Roadrunner, he's like, resistance and roadblocks are like an expert at it. Out of that long list, I think there's a few key signs that resistance is right there and you are experiencing it. So the number one indicator that you are up against your roadblock or you're hitting a roadblock is procrastination. Sound familiar? In fact, so familiar, I actually procrastinated recording this podcast episode. Yep. I came up with this idea about a week and a half ago after talking to a really good friend. And I did a little bit of work on it. And then I told myself, great, I'm going to sit down and work on it the next day. Didn't happen. I was like, oh, I can do this tomorrow. Didn't happen the next day. Didn't happen tomorrow or tomorrow or tomorrow. I think it took me about 5-6 days to actually carve out some time and be like, Victoria, you're working on this tonight. You're going to go to a coffee shop and you're going to focus and you're going to sit down and you are going to finish drafting out this podcast episode. So if you ever have that voice that pops up that says, it can wait, you have time, that's procrastination, and that is a form of a roadblock. So there is a little bit of a caveat here. So sometimes it can be hard to tell the difference between procrastination or when you need to reprioritize based on your needs in that moment. So there are moments where self-care really pops into the equation, where your mental health is deteriorating, where you're exhausted all the time, where you really just kind of need to reprioritize and shift your needs. So I would say if you're doing mundane tasks, unnecessary tasks, or overthinking, that's a form of procrastination that honestly probably doesn't need to be there. But if you are feeling perpetually burned out, if you're overworking yourself, that might be a sign that you actually need to recalibrate. And that's not necessarily a bad form of resistance. It's just your body telling you, hey, something's off. I'm procrastinating because I need some care right now. In that case, I would ask yourself this honest question. How much time can you realistically devote to this dream every day or every week? So I would recalibrate the amount of time you are wanting to commit to this dream. There's a season for everything, and sometimes your seasons have to flip. Sometimes self-care, taking care of your mental health, paying attention to your relationships or your family, sometimes those things have to come first over your other dreams and creative projects. All right, so the next really big clue, sign, thing that you should pay attention to is dun dun dun, fear. Yep, it's such a common one. Fear is actually the fuel to your roadblocks. Fear is the number one thing that is going to give it power. It's oftentimes why we have that saying, the thing that you're most afraid of is actually the thing that's most worth doing, which a lot of the times it is. Now, fear can sometimes be keeping you out of harm's way. So, when fear pops in and says, don't run into the middle of the street because there's cars coming, that's a good fear. That's trying to keep you safe. But other times where it's like, yeah, you shouldn't post that on social media. Like, you shouldn't post your new artwork because it's not good enough. That's an example of the fear that is actually a roadblock, aka resistance, that is trying to keep you back, hold you back. So if fear is the fuel, action is actually the cure. So taking action despite the fear. Another important thing to know about resistance is, and another big sign is those inclinations to destroy relationships, to pick fights. It's the bullying, it's the criticizing, it's the tearing other people down, yourself down, self-medicating, arguing. It is so much easier to destroy or numb than to create. And one of the most drastic examples of this is I actually picked up The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield again. I'd read it before, but wanted to sort of jog my memory. And I forgot that he had this example in there of, and this is drastic, I will grant it to you, but Hitler. And for many of you, you might know this, Hitler actually wanted to go to art school, wanted to be an artist. And Stephen Pressfield kind of points out, it was easier for Hitler to start World War II and the Holocaust than it was for him to just be an artist. That puts it in perspective. I don't know what else could, but talking about your journey, more likely than not, you are going to stumble onto similar forms of resistance and roadblocks over and over and over again. So by identifying the common roadblocks that you often faced, you can A, identify it for what it is instead of taking it personally and being hard on yourself, because that's not helpful. And B, develop some back pocket strategies to use when you inevitably hit the resistance again, because it is going to pop up again. All right, so here's your one thing this week. I want you to spend this next week calling out your roadblocks for what they are. If you start procrastinating, if you start feeding into self-doubt, if you start worrying, incessantly picking fights, criticizing others, self-medicating, I want you to just identify the moment and call yourself out. Oh, hello, roadblock. Ah, that's resistance right there. Oh, I'm procrastinating again. Now here's the deal. I don't want you to try to change the behavior right now. I just want you to get really good at identifying resistance for what it is. Similar to Voldemort, the more you can call it by its name, the more you can take its power away. All right. So don't forget to tune in next week. I am going to bring you part 2 of this resistance series. We're going to talk about starting to develop some of those back pocket strategies by looking at how you've conquered your roadblocks before. So don't forget, subscribe, rate, and review if you're enjoying this podcast, and I will see you next week. Until the next time, stay creative.